Alright, y'all, we are gonna have a little chat about strike plates for deadbolts, because I haven't chatted about that before, and it's something that as a locksmith I deal with all the time, multiple times a day. Setting strike plates, adjusting strike plates, increasing the security for strike plates on doors, any number of things. Strike plates are one of the biggest things that you will get to deal with as a locksmith. So let's get to talking about them, shall we? Alright guys, let's talk about strike plates. First I'm going to cover this up so you're not distracted by the shiny stuff underneath like I do in all my videos. Most of my videos. And we're going to talk about strike plates. With your deadbolt installations on doors, the security of your deadbolt, or how stable it is on the door and how secure it is on your door, is dependent on pretty much two things, or three things. The deadbolt itself, the quality of the latch, the door that it's mounted on, whether it's a hollow door or a thick steel door or a solid wood door, and the frame. The frame and the door is a 50-50 equation. You have 50% here, 50% on the frame. About. If you use short screws, this is a very common thing that we fix all the time, and you'll see it in viral posts off a variety of websites, is to back out the short screws of your strike plate and replace it with 3-inch screws. And we're going to talk about the different types of strike plates and how, quote, good they would be for your door. I'm going to show you this first, and then we're going to look at a frame. So basically this is a standard house construction now. I don't know about all these 2x4s, it's usually just one, but you have a thin wood jamb with 2x4s, the framing, the 2x4s behind it. This is a pamphlet I made for a local meeting where I was asked to speak at, and I made this pamphlet to hand out. But this shows how longer screws go through your strike plate, going through the thin wood. There's only about a 1/2-inch wood jamb, which is the part that the door sits in, the framing of the door. And by using short screws, if somebody kicked the door, it would break that thin wood very easily. So the number one recommended thing, minimum thing to do, is to back out the short screws and take some 3-inch screws and drive them in. So we're going to talk about kind of the nuances of that as well, and not all screws and not all strikes are created equally. So to get started, we're going to kind of start from the cheapest to, I guess, the best, you could say, and quickly go over what deadbolts come with it. This is one of your most common, quote, cheaper, builder's quality, home improvement store. This is kind of the strike plate that you're going to get with any of those places where you're spending $15 to $25 a deadbolt. These are also not all created equally. There are thinner ones and thicker ones. That is very brand dependent. So if we look at that, we got like 1.30 millimeter, and then the thicker one is about 2.33. So pretty much a full millimeter thicker. However, almost all of these come with short screws. We're going to look at a Schlage by Dexter. This is their more affordable line, and we open it up and we see that it comes with the thicker of the two plates. It comes with another plate, but we're going to go over that in a minute. So that is the thicker plate, but it also only comes with these little bitty 1/2-inch short screws. And if we back this up, I'm going to pull a frame out now and let you look at it, so kind of we know what we're talking about throughout this. So this is your typical frame on a house. It's not drilled for a deadbolt, but we're just going to use this. And most of the time, these prefab frames are cut out for your strike to fit into, so you just have to screw it in. But if you see the wood is not thick at all. So basically, this is about that thick, and if somebody kicked it and it had these little short screws that come with less expensive deadbolts, you can see the screw just barely goes through that wood. So even with a pilot hole, which always drill pilot holes before you would, put your screw in, because it will split this wood up and down. It goes with the grain, so it'll split. So drill your pilot hole and put it in. However, if you're using these little short screws, it is going to just basically weaken the area and make it even more susceptible to breaking if somebody kicked it. So let's go ahead and scoot this back up so we can continue with strike plates on their own, now that you know what I'm referring to. And as you can see, the, again, cheaper, the less expensive Schlage brand deadbolt only comes with those short screws. From there, we go to what I call the knob deadbolt strikes. Now, I've been kind of flamed on a couple of installation videos because I used those. And I did that because they come with locks nowadays. If you'll notice, the knob strike plates always have a lip, and that's so the latch, when it goes in, has this surface to ride on. We all know the dead latch needs to be pushed back, and having this curved lip lets it ride on the metal instead of the wood inside. At some point in time within the last 10 years, manufacturers decided to start sending, this is out of the same Schlage Dexter deadbolt, sending these, which are the same size, same height as these, and are exactly the same as your knobs. However, they don't have a lip. So nowadays, when you buy a prefab, pre-hung door and frame, you're going to have two cutouts for this. The world has kind of shifted, or the U.S., I'm sorry, the world has not. The U.S. has kind of shifted to using this and this. I guess at some point, some interior designer, famous interior designer, was like, oh, it needs to be equal instead of this and this, because that just doesn't look right. So let's just make it a fad to do this, and it caught on. So that's where we're at now. With the Schlage Dexter, it comes with each one of the plates. So depending on your however yours is, you can use either or. And almost always come with short screws. If you are lucky, they will come with 1¼ screws. Now, 1¼ screws are longer than this. However, they are still not. Alright, so if you're lucky, these will come with 1¼ screws. However, the 1¼ screws are still usually not long enough, or just long enough, to barely bite into the 2x4 framing behind it. If it is long enough to grab it, it would not be really sufficient to really secure the door as well as it could be. Alright, from there we're going to go to the most common style plate that we all know, and that is the standard Deadbolt strike plate. Now, these are considerably taller than these, and sometimes this particular one, we'll take this one for example, the opening is much bigger. Now, in some areas it's more problematic than others, but here, especially in the south, we have what's called yazoo clay, and it causes doors to shift up and down. So if you're working on a door and the deadbolt is not engaging, or the latch is not catching on the door, frequently you have to move it up or down and then route the wood out to make it catch. It's a very common thing. I do it 10 times a day, sometimes on busier days. However, when you have these smaller ones, it gives you less leeway up and down. So I will typically replace it with these longer ones, and which gives you the more up and down room. Now, all these are also not created equally. There are different thicknesses. You can see the difference there. and even thicker. One of these is even thicker than that. So I don't know where it is in here, but there it is. So see, it's pretty much 3 different thicknesses. However, these are also used, as I have on this flyer, with the strike plate. This is Schlage strike plate. Has been around for 60, 70 years. It came with all Deadbolts from like the 60s to the 90s. This is pretty much your standard style of strike, and it uses these and still does to this day. And that is these. This is what Schlage refers to pretty much as the 10-116 strike kit. And if we pull it out, we see it comes with your plate rounded with your security strike and screws right there. That is these. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this out just so that we can talk about the 2 different kinds of screws there. Let's move this out of the way. So originally Schlage, when they came up with these were metal. And you can see it's just basically a folded, cut out piece of metal, and then it's crimped, folded together. Afterward, they started using plastic as a cost-saving measure because really this does nothing to increase the strength of the door. It's just a dust cup to give it a finished, clean appearance instead of just a hole with the wood exposed. This gives it a cleaner, smoother appearance. And it is used like this. It comes with a heavier plate. This plate by itself is, I think, 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, 3 millimeter. And the metal. So this is how you install this. Now you'll notice these are silver screws. These are kind of a goldish color. These goldish colors came along and are what is sold nowadays, or sent with locks nowadays. But they have a very heavy shank and they have a smooth head. Now this is important. I'm going to go over what this means to you when you are installing strike plates here in just a minute. So basically you would mortise your pocket for this strike plate. Since you're using basically 3 layers, even if you're using the plastic, not many people would be using the metal now, so plastic we'll just say. You have to mortise your strike in about 6 millimeters. So that's pretty deep. That's way deeper than just using one of these plates. However, the advantage is once you mortise it in, you have your heavy screws that go in with this side towards the jamb to bite into the 2x4s. And then you follow behind with your dust cup. And then you take your, this would be at this point just considered a trim plate to give you the finish that you're looking for. So if you're using, dark bronze or steel or even copper or dark colors, then you would use your short screws only, just basically to hold that in, and it bites into the wood. Now Baldwin did come along and they liked that idea so much that they made it kind of part of their Deadbolts. I'm going to put these up here. But Baldwin's kind of jumped out in left field a little bit with several more holes. And the cup, which I don't actually forgot to get a cup. So compared to this dust cup, you really couldn't use this dust cup with this plate. Now in Baldwin's version of this, the dust cup is behind. And it also has 3 holes for this. So basically you would mount in your dust cup with the 3 holes, mount your Baldwin plate. It came with either, depending on the era that you bought the lock, it came with either brass or chrome screws. pull one of these chrome screws out because it's kind of important to what I'm talking about here. And you can see that it sits flush. So when you're using either one of the Schlage or Baldwin, the screw that you use right here is pretty imperative to sitting flush. If you use a screw, let's say you take this Baldwin screw and try to use it in or this Schlage screw and try to use it in a Baldwin plate, it does not sit down flush all the way, and that's going to make this plate kind of not sit correctly on the door. See how it kind of sits higher on that side than that side? So that's one thing to be aware of. It's different head sizes. And with the Baldwin version, you would have your screws, long screws towards the jamb, this screw just to stabilize it. When I'm mounting one of these, I will always use the short screws. You use this on the outside of the door. This is just to stabilize the plate. So before you drill your pallet hole and everything into the wood for that, I always mount the plate with the two short screws. And also the little bit difference in the Baldwin is the center hole is threaded. The center hole is to attach your trim plate, just like with the Schlage. And it comes with these little bitty tiny short screws, and that short screw basically just holds this plate to this metal plate. Baldwin also used the same exact thing for their mortise locks. So this is the security plate for your mortise lock. It also has its own dust cup. As we can see, this dust cup has your 3 holes. So in this scenario, see, it does not go through like Schlage's did, but with your 3 holes, everything lines up. With this bigger plate, this is bigger than number 8, it uses these bigger screws to hold on, same as the small screws. Alright, now, and that leads us to nowadays Schlage. What does nowadays Schlage have? They have this. A lot of Schlage deadbolts, if it doesn't have the 10-116 strike, it will have the 10-092 strike, which is the one we've already gone over. That is this strike. Now, weirdly enough, Weiser also sells that strike with their deadbolts. And one thing I've noticed that's really weird is Weiser has this strike and this style of strike. Depends on which deadbolt, which one they package with it. One of these letters on the deadbolt, I'm sure tells you which strike that is. So, but they always, even if they only have this one, you always get this screw pack. So this screw pack is for this strike, but it still comes in deadbolts that only include this strike, which, as you can see, has actually 1.5-inch screws. So in every one of the deadbolts, it also comes with this screw pack. So you're going to have this screw pack left over. The only thing, I've never understood that, ever understood why they always send. I guess it's so they don't forget screws or something, but that is this security plate. This is the screws that were in that pack. And the longer screws obviously are for your hinge side or your inner part, and then your short little screws are just to stabilize it. Kind of like Baldwin's, but without the security plate. However, it is a pretty thick plate. And it also comes with shorter big screws. Now the shorter big screws are if you have front door, you have side lights where you have a very thin jamb, there's not much room, you cannot use a 3-inch screw. That's what these shorter screws are for, or for those front doors with the side lights. Obviously not very secure, but it is what it is. That's what you give up for a decorative front door with the 2 side lights on each side. So that screw pack is designed only to work with these plates, and the locks come with these plates. Why you want to do this Now this is kind of the big thing with the heads of the screws. You'll see that it doesn't sit flush. So if you close the door and it fits real tight, you're going to scratch your door. You're going to scratch up your door. So this has to be recessed well, and you can't use the long screws because that head is too big. One workaround is cabinet screws or drywall screws. While they're not the best to use, they do have a number 8 head. This is a number 8x3 available from Ace Hardware. It's a cabinet screw. It is not designed for shear pressure like these heavier ones are. You can see the huge difference there. Obviously this screw is much better than that and would perform much better in a shear environment. In fact, the box says not to be used for shear loads. So while not ideal for extra protection, it is still way more ideal than that, if you get my drift. Alright, I am running way out of time. There are some oddball ones. Let's talk about this real quick. These are, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to talk about the new Schlage. This is what Schlage comes with now. And these are actually pretty awesome. It's a dust cup and shield in one. Now it is thinner. It's not as thick as the original Schlage dust cup. However, if you really wanted to, and if you had enough of them, you could obviously use it still with it, but you would have to use the bigger screws. But this is how they kind of expect you to do it. It comes with a hole in the back, which lets you drive in a screw into the jamb way deeper than you could with these. So this is kind of an awesome alternative that Schlage has. And then you again attach your trim plate to the front like that. So yes, this one is one of your most ideal small, secure, pretty dang secure strike plates on the door. Very similar to that is Lorry deadbolts. Now Lorry are not as popular because it is a locksmith type, deadbolt. You're not gonna find Lorry deadbolts because it uses mortise cylinders, and it's very hard to put in and together. So they kind of have their same thing. You can either use it with just the thin plate and the dust cup, or it also comes with a security strike and the faceplate and the 3-inch screws. Now we see the 3-inch screws. Here's another thing: fully threaded screws. It is very difficult to find full threaded screws with a number 8 head. Luckily, I have a bolt and screw place in town where I was able to go and say, hey, I need a small head full thread 3-inch screw. What you got? They only had them in chrome, so that kind of sucks. But I'm able to buy them by the pound there. And this head screw, while it does stick up just a bit, it is pretty acceptable to use. But that type of screw comes with it. Having full thread is really good because it will continue to hold into the wood here. Very frequently when you have that shoulder on a screw, once you run that through, it's loose in the wood. I like the heavier full thread screws. So here again, you would just do this. If you wanted to use it in combination with your plate or your dust box, basically you would stack it like this with your long screws and then your trim plate over it. So that is Lorry deadbolts. They go by several names, but it is what it is. While we're talking about latch screws, these are used for wood and metal. These are bi-metal or bi-wood or multi-type Schlage screws. I've actually had carpenters return these saying these aren't for wood. Yes, they are for wood. That is for wood. That is for metal. If you have a metal frame, it's 8/32 thread. When you screw this through that thread, it won't really hurt it, and then this thread grabs into the metal, or this just pulls it through and you have kind of a fine thread. So yes, these are metal and wood screws. Alright, we talked about these. This is the same thing. This, in addition to the Weiser, some of the more expensive Weiser deadbolts, this type of plate comes with some grade 2 hardware as well with your 3-inch screw pack. Alright, back in the day, there was some oddballs. This is an old Dexter or Master by Dexter. These were, you find these on some of the older houses from the 70s, and it has kind of its own little lip there. While it's not really a security plate, I wanted to go ahead and mention it. Going back to these real quick, some of these that you have no lip, some do. The no lip go on your security plates. These come with LSDA, like LSDA grade 2 deadbolts. They have that lip. That's supposed to kind of bite into the wood when you tighten the screw down. Because you're not doing that with ones that you use security plate for, it is smooth. That's so it has a smooth surface right here. Because if you see, that does not sit flush. And the one way you can tell Baldwin and Schlage strike plates apart, they look exactly the same. Well, from back in the day anyway. We're going to go through here. Here we go. Here's a... no. Here's a Schlage. Alright. Can you tell me how you can tell them apart? Yes. Baldwin's always had a hexagon cut. Well, is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexagon cutout? Schlage's was round. So I know that belongs to Baldwin and this one belongs to Schlage. Alright, again, there were a couple more other oddballs. We have the ANSI strikes, ANSI. These come with commercial locks, but I have seen them and I have installed them on doors. This is the knob version. This is another style of a knob version, but you can use these on deadbolts. If you have just the right type of frame, then these work well. These are, while they're not, you can use bigger screws. You can actually use the Schlage screws. Fit perfectly. These Schlage screws are pretty much one of the best things that you can have. While it's not off center so that it's biting further back into the wood, this is, again, way more impressive than something like this. So while not usually found, you can use these for installs. Here we have an ASA deadbolt strike. It's very similar to the Schlage in that it has these 2 holes in the back, and we'll just borrow some of Schlage screws to show you how they work. This would be like this with this also. They don't go straight, they kind of go out like that. And then your plate is there actually is a plate that goes in front of that as well, depending on the color. And obviously a super thick steel welded security plate. Not really a dust cup, because dust cup, it's open at the top and bottom. However, it is one. And from there, you basically go to like your Jamb jackets. There is one that's kind of common in the locksmith world called the Tough Strike. We can see why. This is pretty awesome. Don't sell a whole lot of these because it's pretty hard to install. But that would be your most awesome deadbolt strike ever, short of going through a bigger plate. So that is the Tough Strike, guys. That is a good 4 inches. Let's see, this is a 3-inch screw. No, that's not a 3-inch screw. This is a 3-inch screw. 4-inch post welded on, solid steel. And yeah, it goes in, and then you just mount it to the door. It actually doesn't come with faceplates. That's one of the disadvantages of this. If you don't have bright brass hardware, you're kind of out of luck with that. And then we jump up to like what I call the Jamb jackets. These are used most of the time to cover damage, like if it's been kicked open before, or even to prevent damage. I mean, it's good to prevent damage. If you have 5.5-inch backset locks, which is a standard, however, this is from a big box store, but this is good to cover damage, and it's got all these along the edge. However, the screws that come with this are pretty weak and thin. They're not super heavy-duty screws. However, the longer you go, the more chance you have of whatever force being directed at that door, spread out. And we're talking about this strike plate right here. This is a security strip. We sold many of these. We saw a lot of these when the kick-ins start happening. You knock out your holes depending on your spacing. If we take this, we can see the standard 5.5 spacing there. Or if somebody has drilled your lock at different sizes, this is kind of an all-in-one. There is another version of this. This is 4 foot long. It's 18 gauge steel, which is in millimeters. Still pretty thin, 2.14 millimeter. And it comes with what are pretty much drywall screws. They are thin, but they go all the way up and down the door. Now, this one, you do have to have a significant gap in the door. You do have to have a pretty good gap because you couldn't mortise. You can. I've done it before on tight doors, but it is an extremely difficult, tedious job to mortise this whole strike plate. So this is more designed for like steel skin security doors that come with a wood frame. And basically, this plate is just going to go all the way up and down the frame like that. So you can adjust it up and down, and that would distribute, you know, any weight applied to the door. This is basically changing this wood frame into a metal skin frame, which is what you want. I've never understood why metal doors come with a wood frame, but you know, it's kind of an is what it is type of thing. All right, I don't think I forgot anything except for, you know, my kit. And I will say, when you go to the store and try to find screws, you know, you'll see these spec screws. This is kind of a big thing nowadays. And you may think, oh yeah, let me go grab that screw. I can put a 4-inch screw in there. But if you're trying to use something like that with your little bitty strike plate, see how much that, now you could countersink that some more and make it work. You know, if you're handy enough, you can make it work. But if you're going to go to that trouble, just boost up, just order you a Schlage strike plate. We have plenty of them, so if anybody's needing those, if any of my consumer people who are reviewing this are interested in getting this strike kit right here, if you have one of these plates, but you want one of these behind it, we can definitely sell you the 2 screws in the metal plate. We have tons of those. So, you know, shoot us a message if you want one. We can hook you up, or several, even if you have several doors on your house. But anyway, that's one of the problems with just putting longer screws in it, is the head diameter not sitting flush. All right, so what I was saying was this is pretty much what I carry into jobs, and it's got all my pilot bits and all that. And anyway, I wanted to say thanks for watching again, guys. If you have any questions or comments, as always, hit me up with them in the comments section. Otherwise, y'all have a great weekend, and we will catch you next video. Use the right screws and strike plates for your installation is my last words there.